Last night it rained, so it's kind of cool out today, and this is kind of novel. It's the first rain I've had this month. Don't know if it'll change anything here or not. Maybe dampen down the dust a bit. One of the places I want to visit today. Scavengers are out this morning, of course. Left on the main road, you'll see that orange-yellow, newly painted complex back there. We went through last night, and there's the large temple I haven't, or whatever it is, on the left I haven't been to yet. Just kind of orientating myself. Here's the river, what passes for it. And then I think this is part of that slough, if you will, that channel that we were unable to cross yesterday. And this wall may all be part of the same complex. I'll try and explore that right now. Looking down into what is swill, since there's no running water much, I don't imagine. A number of birds. Yes, we're entering Raja Mahal, and also Sheesh Mahal. We can't tell. I mean, we're right at the site. There's nothing in English, of course. Having said that, here is an old sign that would be very useful, particularly if it were in a folder handout, and maybe it will be, but highly doubtful. A couple of buffalo wandered up to this entrance and are just standing there looking at me for some reason, as though I'm blocking them. If they only knew. Create considerable blockage here. Going into a rather modest gate with its very spiky but simple elephant spikes. Detail here to give it more strength, I assume, as well as design. And some smaller ones here. Broken down door, but at least for history and posterity it's still here. Here's our first view. Into one of the turrets or towers. You see a different kind of a shooting platform there. It's interesting, but here what's interesting is this hole. I'll look down it. It's a deep hole. Whether it was a well, hard to tell. Our entry. Great place to take a pan, although I'm sure we'll get more. Sun trying to poke through probably will. A grand location in its day. One would think that the mucky mucks here would not allow trash, etc. to accumulate. A narrow stairway with relatively steep steps, which is characteristic of everything, believe it or not, even though in those days, and even today, they're of shorter stature than I am, but it makes it hard to get up and down, but I guess with adrenaline pumping, they're running fast. Oops. Oh, that's the end of that. I'm not here to learn in depth about this fort or palace. It's one of probably 100 in this whole area of India. It looks like it's a battlement of some sort, a tower, but all filled in with trees. It's always interesting to look at old structures, see archways filled in, and with what here filled in, still leaving windows. It's obvious that up there, the white balconies, and off to the left, the red sandstone balconies were the residences and confines of the royal family. Just reflecting on how I glibly compare a fortress like this and a palace like this to some of the others I've seen, some more grand, some less, and fail to recognize the incredible amount of energy and resources that went into building each one. And yet, as we can see by the construction of anything today, ditches or whatever, manpower is cheap. Enough time and enough laborers, you can build anything you want. If it's an irony of democracy that while we don't waste resources necessarily on the aggrandizement of individuals, we generate a greater population, and it's net zero. take that stairway up, but I'm discovering that oftentimes stairways go into midair, and there's no way to get from that upper part if I got there over to this part. This large area I've been walking in has relatively new, although curiously patched up, if in fact it's patched, terrazzo. This may be for parking. I wonder if this is the same kind of tree that inhabits Angkor Wat. So presume, without looking at the history, that the British occupied this and all other forts at one time. Raja Mahal, Jahangir Mahal, Sheesh Mahal, Praveen Mahal are to the right. I think Mahal may mean palace. Tope Khana. Clue what it might have been, but it does house that turret with the trees. I don't get the sense of looking at these of great beauty, but rather just merely great size. Discover a little bit of relief carving. Looks pretty in its detail. A very heavy 19th century looking iron staircase railing. This room looks like one of the pavilions for private or public audience. Here the accent is on massive pillars, not necessarily elegant, but inside this ceiling that once had perhaps very beautiful work. We'll go up a little bit farther. Nothing stands out here, just a floral kind of a design pattern. But then around the edges, more interesting work. The peacock, of which we saw some roaming around yesterday afternoon. These vertical panels beneath the ceiling don't reveal much in their deteriorated condition. This is that it would have had a very light feeling and color on these heavy columns, but a rich aesthetic feel capping it all in the ceiling. Nowhere does much design stand out. Directly above where one of the mucky mucks would sit, I just get the sensation of a badly aged carpet. Panels seem to depict something up in that triangular section. I'm wanting to think it's elephants, but I can't be sure. Beneath may just have been scenes of court life. I climbed up onto a corner pavilion in this large room, and we can still see the outlines of figures, but only their outlines. Some of these colors must endure weathering well, and others not. It almost looks like some kind of Egyptian early painting, stylized as silhouettes. But I think you can make out just a hint of color. For example, in the skirt of the person second from the left. What's interesting is I pan across here, you'll get the definite suggestion that we are looking at women. In fact, all about here seems to be the case. One of them in that triangular section here seems to be a couple of levels of column and arched pavilions. Could this have been a section where women were allowed to sit? This raised area is still another raised area that will go up. I wonder what it was like to live here, what the court intrigues were like. Those who occupied the area I'm standing in, would they have reminisced about the people they saw up on those higher turrets and walkways? Would it have been a question of status? I suspect. We've been visiting the Raja Mahal. The king's palace was begun in 1538 AD. Earliest and among the most beautiful of the buildings in the royal citadel, was inhabited for over 200 years and has seen several additions and alterations. Part of this mahal is now being used as a heritage interpretive center. Looking at this, we are apparently here, but the area they're talking about is to my right, and we don't have any access to it. We are just in here, but all this is apparently closed off. Come around the corner, let's see if we can go inside. Standing outside, I don't yet know if I'll be able to go in, but anyway, started in 1531 AD, completed 1539. We are allowed in. My ticket checked, we're now allowed in, so we enter into the palace. I'll just pan about so you can get a sensation of what I see. Massive in size, some detail up there on that facing. It looks like some pretty carving. That may actually be a marble, but I don't think so. I think it's just a white plaster. There, the chalice. The women could see through, plus ventilation. Again, just a sense of big, massive. Either a well or a water feature of some sort. Maybe drainage. The form looks to be all red sandstone faced, but its primary purpose was, other than to provide elevations, perhaps for different levels of the royal entourage and family. And notice little appointments of red sandstone. Look closely and we'll go up a little bit above. Underneath the eaves it's painted. So you had the red sandstone, the white looking marble, and some of it may be marble, the carving, and then painting, both on the horizontal eaves as well as at the very top of the vertical wall. So we'll go up there. So this gentleman has just opened up the door for this room, the king's room, where I can take a look at some of the And we'll just pan about so you can see. I don't know whether these are preserved or restored in the past, but gives us a sense of the rich color that we would have seen throughout the palace. Okay. Each of these reflects King Rama or the gods, and stories that would be immediately understood by these folks, Hindus, as would Christian scenes by Christians. And I'll stop and get some detail in a moment. Here, an elephant and crocodile. And notice the man in the air. Elephants. It looks like a tiger, doesn't it? These figures may all have been important people of their time. In the same way that we see pictures of council members in a county courthouse. Off to see some more paintings. There is Rama and some other figures. Notice the monkey off to the right. There we get an idea of some of the detail. Let's take a closer look at these paintings. Here is Ganesha. This is a painting inside of a niche. There an elephant. These may depict the devils that torture the people in hell. Most all religions have those concepts, I suspect. This is a band, a graphic band that goes all the way around. All that inhabits this place now are this caretaker and the monkeys. Those rooms we were in were the private rooms of the king, probably worship rooms, who knows for sure, I don't. But look at these little things like this dais here, or platform, that one over there, that little room, what would have been used for? You know, I need something over there, put something there for something or other. He's going to take me up above, I think, now. We're on the second floor now. I'm peering through that window, and you may be able to see it in the top panel, the temple beyond the river. So now we're in a special room, beautiful detail that we have not seen often. It's what redeems your travel to a place like this. I gave my friend, the caretaker, 50 rupees, which is about, I think, 35 cents. Maybe more. Maybe 75. Not much. There's no way I have time to appreciate this, so I'll just pan slowly and hope I have time to do it sometime later before I die. You'll notice this room is very similar to the one we were in before in dimension, but different in its decoration. Lighter, perhaps more female. Notice these pictures of females, Pamela, of females. Here are a couple more of females. So this may have been women's quarters up here.
Lakshmi Temple.
The room that he has taken me to that has deteriorated considerably, but we're starting to get a sense of how this large, bulky cement and brick structure was embellished to a royal standard. Again, you can notice pictures of women here, terribly deteriorated, but certainly enough that can be restored someday if they take photographs or videos like I am. Archaeologists do it, and then preserve the information that they can get with technology today as to the exact colors, etc. All of this is reproducible. These jalouses and what would be in a fortress, a shooting port. Here is where women could see what was going on. Taller than the average woman, but if I bend down, you can see that this becomes very easy for me to see about down in the courtyard. These are very designed in relief, very frame-like, as though they were pictures. And perhaps these columns were also either beautifully painted or painted as though they were columns. It's the light, pretty, filming underneath an archway that you would walk through. But notice the beautiful, light, airy graphic. And I wonder if this was a little bit richer green than this minty green that we're getting a sense of here. Here, those little round stones with holes to hold flags, presumably. But could they have also been used to create some kind of an airy pavilion here of fabric? Prevalent everywhere. Climbed up a little bit higher. Now myself and the monkeys are at the same level. But I see some other travelers who are at a higher level, so I need merely look for more stairs, I suspect. when I climb the stairs is there's a hollow sound, as though either they've been covered by something with a little space between, or they're not solid rock like they usually are. Interesting, because what looks like a big building is in fact relatively thin walls with these corridors in between the walls, inside the walls I should say. Let's see, if I keep walking I'll find a way to get up higher. Here we go. Have to be careful because the archways in these stairs are lower than for my height. There, a view of that temple, which we'll visit a little bit later today, or I may stay another day. Those looking at it from the outside, or those looking at it from up here, and ignoring the fact that most of these exterior walls are simply walls with a corridor running between them, we could be duped into believing this is a huge, massive structure, which technically it is. In fact, these are just to give the illusion of towers as a fortress. Another palace that presumably we have yet to visit and get even higher into the air. If some of these palaces is, they belong to kings who were kicked out of other areas by stronger rulers and came down here, which was considered somewhat remote, to try to establish themselves with some safety. So I guess no surprise that some of this building structure seems to be an illusion. And down we go. You feel that? Hear that hollow sound? It's curious to me. What's interesting is the stairway system seems to be loaded with some disturbing attributes. For example, this just cuts right off. There's no way down here. One of the other areas, as you came down off the stairs and turned left out a doorway, went into open space like Game of Thrones. How pretty that panel would have looked. Here, that there was no desire for symmetry, at least within these three panels. Symmetry was translated across the entire room so that those three panels are symmetrically like the ones on the right. In this remaining fragment, we can see that paint probably was throughout this outer room. It's a pretty little building. Notice those square holes probably held some kind of rod that would allow for a drapery perhaps over this section here. I'm just guessing. And I wonder what that hole down in there was for, and why that portion recessed at all. It had been some kind of a bathing room, and that was simply drainage. Notice the floor drops off quite substantially. It's a large latrine room, probably empties out into space. That was a triple holder, another triple holder. These are probably for the folks who worked here. Here's a single hole, were some for men, some for women. There's what these were for. Most of that little room and the latrines are right down there. And notice how that has an angle upward, implying that something went up towards that wall. But this, could it have been a well? Another painted room. Much more weathered, but still detail visible. Substantial posts for hanging stuff. And I think they're wood. Appears to be a musician, I could be wrong. These traders or game players. Like a guru, the man to the right of center. Could that be depicting hell and heaven? Purposeful draining or drainage That coming from that hole that we saw earlier over there. This is the unintended irony and hypocrisy of India, that it makes demands that it once wanted to have achieved and are noble, but are unachievable as a practical matter. Raja Mahal Palace and accompanying Sheesh Mahal Hotel. What I think is kind of cute in this large chalk is this deteriorated tennis court, perhaps installed by the British in their rule. So all of the chambers of this palace have been decorated with paintings. Only a few rooms remain. This is the culminating point of the evolution of medieval Indo-Islamic architecture. A rather modest entry. I don't know if it always was.
Very important palace.
I'll pan about so you get a sense. This is a very pretty, and while large, it doesn't have that heaviness that the other palace has. It's broken up, first of all, by the red sandstone on the balconies and on some of these little kiosks up through here, but also on this first floor, these elephant supports look like they're made out of red sandstone. And probably were pretty dramatic in the day. Impressive doorways tell us a lot about what you can expect, I think. They were something that, when you think about it, we deal with every day, but tend not to notice. Now, maybe like the Tetons, if you live there long enough, you quit noticing them. Tell from being here that this courtyard was intended to not only unite this palace, make it a unity for the people who lived here, but to be a beautiful centerpiece. Notice this water feature here, composed of not only the central pool that it looks like you could walk down into various levels, but also these little side pools. Whether they were for getting into, I don't think so. There's only one step. Hole, curiously. I always wonder about these anomalous things. They're the ones that are intriguing to me. Elegant design replaces that size is important aesthetic philosophy. Inlay detail before we enter through this door out of the courtyard into the building. We went into another room with this inlaid ceiling and this corner columns detail. Now it's all done in cement, I believe, but it's that elephant motif again. Notice detail all the way across there. This was an important little room. We exit out a grand doorway, small but very elegant. Double elephants, one's been chopped away. Looks with what looks like a bird in the center portion. Interesting to know that symbology. Doors would close and then this post would slide out of that hole to lock them in place. Step onto what must have been a very important balcony for the man. And let's see why. We're going to focus first on the drama surrounding his exit from that doorway. Notice the two elephants to the side. What looks like a yellowish or gold-colored double borders. jalousies above, a dome above, I think. These two little balconies. But notice how beautiful, even today, is the implied richness of the architectural detail, as well as the materials and the colors used. That profusion of strong supports for that balcony of red sandstone. This whole sub-balcony of jalousies implying rooms full of people observing. And it sweeps off to our right in a symmetrical fashion. Now we'll go back to the doorway and see what he saw. Closer look at the details surrounding this door. How almost tawdry the other palace seems compared to this. This reminds me of the palace I saw in Romania that was so grand, and then the son built one with dramatically fewer funds, and it was such a pale in comparison. This is what the man saw. Perhaps that structure there, if it was there in time, those walls that surround this area, whatever that building is. And notice the suggestion of temples in the background there. How much of this existed in his day, I don't know. Explore over to where those folks are. In the citadel, several structures were built to support the powerful army maintained by the Bundela state. The Untkhana of Camel House is considered one of such military structures. This is apparently the Camel House. There's dispute as to what this building was, whether it was a camel stable or a pleasure house. You know, I think it was a pleasure house. Why? I haven't a clue. It was all painted, apparently. It just seems to be a grid, if you will, of hallways in between these pillars. If it was a house of pleasure, I'm unsure what pleasure was being pursued, since I don't see any rooms. It has this patio, if you will. The grade slopes down that way and slopes that way. It's a strange looking building. Looks more like a bastion. Its inside is a haunting design because I don't see its purpose. We're a camel stable. I can't see why it would be any different than a horse stable, which for a large number, the most efficient way is rows of stalls. This is not that. This fog or smog, I can't be sure, with all due respect, what it is today. May be a legitimate allusion to the imagery that we have of India. What was over there on that structure? Notice that that's a half circle. Could it have simply been some kind of military design? It looks to be a circular well type thing in the center, but quite large. It's interesting how the scraps of history are so inscrutable to us, but we're so dominant and presumed to be immutable in their time by the people who used them. Now I want to return to this palace and get upstairs. I didn't do that. But before we go, let's look at some of the detail. Notice those round circles that I can see on the side of the building. What did they symbolize? Why are there 3 and not 4 for symmetry? Why are there 2 to the... Why are they of different sizes? Notice the blue at the bottom of that domed kiosk. I wonder how prevalent that color was. That wall on the left defined some kind of graded platform. You would think. Pretty flower on a thistle. Looks different than our thistles, but just as deadly. Standing on that wall, and the way they designed things, they could easily have sloped it down. And it does appear to me to be subtly sloped away from the building down. Up onto the second floor and gone into the rooms, which seem to be all interconnected from one little chalk or courtyard to another. Notice the blue. Notice again that circular motif, but here a multi star device. Here in the corner, this pinwheel circle. The circle seems to be important here. Here's another. The Jalis entered under that little dome. Pretty designs, aren't they? Camera grasps for little details. The repetitions over the lovely arched doorways, for lack of a better term, into each room. But I wonder if they're there simply because that color was more enduring in this deteriorating weather. There are massive columns here, so there is a similarity. There is a transference out of necessity, architecturally, structurally, or desire. Here we see that kind of motif that you see principally over mosque doors, particularly the part in the corner there. That overhanging three-dimensional motif. These finials hanging down, haven't seen those before. Just an embellishment, I'm sure. Hint of blue again. It must have been a beautifully dominant color here. Those niches filled with paintings. These walls covered with paintings. We will have virtual reality implants, and we'll just mentally go back and forth between what we look at now and how it would have looked as recreated by CGI archaeologists. Our experience of as tourists will dramatically be enhanced. The hints of blue give us a little hint of how much drama there was. a little bit on this detail in the hopes that we can deduce more from it. Notice again the circular motif. What did the circle in this form symbolize? The Indian is so immersed in noise that I think it feels comfortable without them. We drop down underneath a lower level of Eve is more graphic that's been fortunately protected. In the courtyard to the outside of the building are 3 sets of rooms. Here's the inner set. Notice that this used as a painter's easel, a frame, a black and then a white and then a red, and then who knows what artwork was on it. The ceiling's molded black pattern just gives us a hint of colors that must have been. But this is interesting. Notice these pretty little carved elephants that would have held rods going from here over to that area to hold those curtains that we're used to seeing. The outer room, notice the jalousies and a place for people to stand so they can look over that balcony and see what's going on out in the city. It would have been a richly decorated room. This is the view they had. Quite limited, actually. It's too bad the designer did not make these holes slope down. That would have been wise, and at least useful. What a limited world they had. All the heads have been broken off by the Vandals, the scum of history. Another photo session. Here in this kiosk, it's large domed area. Almost at the top. But from any view, architecturally, you encounter beauty. I don't know what it is. Got a chalice that's large enough to actually see out of. The fish spend time wondering what it would be like to live above the water. Does it even know there is? All those circles there on that bottom section seems to suggest that everything there would have been painted. If only they would restore one of these, as is sometimes done, so that we would have an idea of what the rest looked like. Imagine if they took that section over there and just did it perfectly. Someday, the designer imagined this design. This is a beautiful little kiosk or balcony, I suspect. Beautiful in the sense it's made out of red sandstone, which looks like mahogany, but beautifully carved. Imagine the women who would stand out here and chat with each other and look through, see people, see foreigners, see dignitaries, see India. shadows, you get a little sense of the beauty that would have transmitted also from these chalices. Notice the strategy of the larger opening ones here versus those there which are design and light. So this architect was anticipating their use. And also notice these pretty birds. It was an elegant cage. Notice the smoothness of these walls. You could see it in the reflection. This is how all the walls were done, not as we normally see them. It's only in these tight little staircases that are well protected from weather that we see it. It aided going up and down these stairs or not, I don't know. I think I'm on the second level, but at the exterior, notice that there's this hallway that runs the full length. So presumably at this level all the way around. Even as I pan around, you'll see that it curves around some kind of tower kiosk above us. And here for some of the rooms that are opening, but there's painted blue for whatever's inside of there. You can see through it, but I don't know what's inside that room. But yes, I do. So this is just a tiny little room. What its purpose was, who knows? It has a door and those three little squared windows. This is interesting. It's a large grinding mechanism for probably wheat or something of that nature. I've never seen anything of this scale. Looks like it was probably maybe made from cement long before they realized how that could destroy your teeth. Presumably you hooked a couple of bullocks to that end of the shaft and they just rolled that wheel around. It must have worn through, as it looks like it's doing, that shaft fairly often. Wondering as I look at this if it was actually used to break up stone or to break up something for the making of plaster or cement. Notice those rebar that's been fashioned into something that might have attached to a device. Notice this outer ring that's quite deep, as though here there was an animal that tracked along that space. It does have a very solid texture to it, like it were plaster that's now ground up, and then the water gets on it and turns it to solid plaster. Down here we'll find out what this structure is.